style of interviewing, Claude then went on to replace Nick Hewer in 2015. A cancer survivor, father, grandparent, and an incredibly successful businessman and entrepreneur. He doesn't do many of these interviews, so we are truly honoured that he's able to join us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming tonight's very special guest, Claude Littner. Good evening, Claude. How are you? I think you might be on mute.
Yeah. Am I all right now?
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you for the introduction. I hardly recognised it.
How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine, thank you. How about you?
Brilliant, thanks. So
Good.
We're really pleased to have you on our JLGB virtual programme tonight as we continue to celebrate 125 years of JLGB. We've been boosting positivity and keeping children and their families active, healthy, and entertained for 20 weeks now since lockdown began, with the help of a very special guest helping us each evening. So if you don't mind me asking, what made you say yes to joining us this evening?
Well, I mean, first of all, really, it's Adam. I know Adam. He's very involved with my son and football. And so when he asked me, it was hardly something I could say no to. And it's a pleasure to do these kind of things anyway. So if it brings some measure of interest to others, I'm all for it.
Amazing. So we are all about acts of kindness here at JLGB. So of course, you joining us here is an act of kindness in itself. But how has lockdown been treating you and your family? And how have you all been keeping positive in this incredibly difficult time?
Well, the truth is that I have not suffered at all. I think that I'm very single-minded and very positive about everything. So for me, the challenge was to keep healthy, make sure my family was safe and healthy, and just abide by the rules and try and make sure that nothing went wrong. And so it's been a bit of a challenge, if you like, not seeing my children and grandchildren or seeing them from a distance and not being able to hug them because we are a very close family. But for all other things, really, it's been an irritation rather than a great inconvenience of not being able to go out and meet people and do the things that I normally do. But frankly, I've kept myself very busy, very occupied, completely positive, because I'm a positive person anyway. And whereas I know that many people have had their lives completely destroyed and ruined, that's understandable. Personally, I've had a rather easy passage.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I know for me personally, seeing my family was the hardest part about it. And we can all take that lesson of keeping busy and keeping positive. So if you don't mind, let's go back to the very beginning. You were born in New York before your parents moved to London, and your mother was American born, but your father was originally from Austria, having fled the Nazis in the 1930s. So how do you think this impacted you as you grew up, and how much would you say it's defined your identity, if you're happy to share this story?
Well, I've always thought that I was very special because I came from an exceptionally special family. And I suppose everyone's family is special. But for me, my mother was very beautiful and American, and obviously American, a real native New Yorker. And so she was different from all my family's friends and all my family. And my father, being Austrian, he had an accent, which I didn't realize, but people immediately recognized that he wasn't British. So from both sides, my parents were different from ordinary English people, if you would like. And also their experiences were completely different as well, because my mother, having gone through the war in New York, was barely cognizant of the fact that there was a war, whereas my father had really suffered and struggled and escaped and had a tortuous time, really, in terms of making his way from Paris, which is where my grandfather was living at the time, through to Europe and bribing and escaping from the velodrome in Paris and a whole host of horrific incidents, eventually making their way to Portugal, and from Portugal to Cuba, where they lived for a while whilst they were waiting to make their way to New York. And actually, it's when they got to New York, my father studied chemical engineering at New York University, and that's the time that he was introduced on a blind date to this beautiful woman who turned out to be his wife and my mother. So, it's, these things happen in life. From bad often comes good. And even though the war times were horrific and a number of members of my family did unfortunately not make it through the war, for those who made it through, they were rejuvenated and they took a different view of life, very much as part of something that they were lucky enough to have survived, and therefore it was important for them to make the most of life when they could. And that was the attitude that my father and my family had throughout their lives.
Wow, that's so interesting to hear two very different stories from your parents' childhood and your childhood. So yeah, and what about your childhood? Growing up, did you take part in any youth activities? And how would you say these opportunities shaped you? And would you say it helped develop your first entrepreneurial spirit and drive?
Well, I think that my upbringing was unusual. First of all, because obviously I've told you about my parents, and also it was strange that I went to a French school, so I didn't really immediately mix with lots of Jewish kids, because the lycée was lots of embassy kids and people who really just spoke French and were in England. So everything was in French at the lycée. And so I didn't have too many friends apart from synagogue and cheder, who were Jewish. But eventually, through the passage of time, I met quite a lot of Jewish friends who have become lifelong friends. So I had a kind of slightly different sort of upbringing. We first lived in the sort of West End area, and then when I was 8 years old, we moved to Golders Green. And really, a lot of my life is surrounded around Golders Green, my friends from Golders Green, the synagogue, and general just activities of a normal kind of Jewish guy in the 1960s, which was a wonderful time to be growing up.
Definitely. That sounds so interesting. So you studied as an accountant, but soon developed a reputation for being a turnaround specialist in business. So can you tell us more like what this is about? And how did you know you had a knack for helping businesses at the lowest ebb get back on their feet, as it sounds incredibly difficult?
Well, let me just take a step back and answer your question a bit more carefully. And that is that I absolutely hated school. It's not so much that I hated school as they hated me. It was a real problem for me because I was a very naughty child, and right at the beginning of every academic year at school, we got into a new class, and I was hoping that I could do rather better than the year before, but because my reputation was so bad for being so disruptive, I found that I was always sort of pushed to the back of the class. And so for a lot of years, I really struggled at school and had very little opportunity to show any kind of academic prowess. The only thing I was good at, apart from sport, I've always been very good at sport, is sort of like ducking and diving. And so to a certain extent, I used to, because I kept kosher, I was allowed to go outside of the school for my lunch and things like that. So my mother used to make me sandwiches and things like that. So I ate it outside, and that enabled me to go to the shops and buy stuff. So I used to buy gobstoppers at a halfpenny and sell them to my friends for a penny. So very, very quickly, I amassed quite a lot of money from the profit I was making from buying and selling gobstoppers. Then I joined with my friend Leonard, who's a lifelong friend, and we formed the Clend Stamp Club. So it's Claude and Leonard Stamp Club. And there again, we did very, very well. We'd buy stamps and we sell them to our friends. It was very fashionable in that time to be stamp collecting. Also, because I was allowed to go out, we used to play football at lunchtime. And if we ever hit the ball over the fence, I was the only one who was allowed to go out. So I'd quickly rush over to Woolworths, collect a whole load of money from my friends, rush over to Woolworths, buy a ball, bring it back. We'd hit it over the fence. And actually, this was quite another area of profit for me. So I realized from a very early age that academically, I struggled. But actually, from a commercial point of view, I found that I had lots of opportunities to make money. And my family were always very proud of the fact that I had sort of a post office account, and I put money in the post office, and then I had a bank account, and then I started buying shares. And I was always sort of very, my grandmother and everyone was very proud of the fact that I was saving money and wasn't somebody who was a spendthrift and wanted the last sort of latest fashion things. So to a certain extent, that maybe just sow the seeds of my entrepreneurial experience. Also, my father and his brother were in business, and they were wonderful business people because they had a very caring attitude towards business. It wasn't hard business. It was very much a family concern where, if somebody didn't turn up for work because they were ill, that was never a problem. They were always making allowances for people, and they had a very wonderful reputation in the industry for the way that they conducted business. So I think that from a very early age, I realized that one's reputation, one's credibility are things that are incredibly important in life. And that's something that stuck with me, I think, throughout my whole career.
Yeah.
I still probably haven't answered your question.
No, definitely you have done. And I think a lot of the children and young leaders will be taking some of your advice about your earlier first businesses, whether their parents thank you or not. We'll see.
I think what is important, and I think this is incredibly important, really, is that not everybody can be academically gifted, if you like, and that some people may be slow burners and then they catch up a little bit later on. So for me, even though I wasn't very good at school, later on I did catch up. I did get to understand what it was all about, and it was just the school that I was at was probably not right for me. It was too strict. For somebody who's a bit of a free, individual. So I think that, for all the young people who are watching, if you're good at school, keep carrying on, work hard because it's worth it. But if you're not doing terribly well, don't be disheartened. Hopefully you will find something that you're good at. And what's very important is that you do find that thing that you're good at and work hard to actually improve your skills, because that's what it's all about.
Definitely. I think so many young leaders and children in school and within the education system will be so relieved and inspired to hear that. So thank you. And I, of course, have many Lord Sugar and Apprentice questions as a big fan of The Apprentice. But I want to give that opportunity to our audience. So our first audience question goes to Emma.
Hi, how are you?
Hi, Emma.
So it's been said that going to work for Amstrad and then Alan Sugar would change your life. So how did you first meet Lord Sugar, and how was your job interview? Was it like being on The Apprentice?
Okay, well, the thing is that what had happened was that I had been running a very large shirt manufacturing company in northern France and had turned that round very successfully. I came back to UK and I didn't have a job. And I spoke to a friend of mine, and I said, do you know anything about any jobs around or anything like that? And he said, well, I think I'll speak to my brother-in-law because he might have something. So I said, oh, thank you very much indeed. Anyway, a few weeks later, the word came back. His brother-in-law, whoever the hell he was, didn't have anything, and I carried on my search. And in point of fact, I found a very good position, which meant me going back to France and Spain, being the chief executive of a public company, the subsidiary of a public company. And so I thought that's where I was off to next. And then my friend came back to me and said, oh, my brother-in-law would like to speak to you. And so can you go and see him like next week? So I said, yeah, okay, who is this brother-in-law of yours? And it happened to be Alan Sugar. But I'd heard the name Alan Sugar, so I was intrigued to see this guy. And when you meet somebody quite famous, for example, your eyes light up with the enthusiasm. And so sort of my eyes lit up when I actually saw Alan Sugar, and his eyes did not light up when he saw me. We went into this room, and there's a bit of controversy about how this happened. My recollections are very clear. Alan Sugar's differ somewhat. Went into this room, we sat at a round table. Alan had my CV in front of him, and we just both sat there. He didn't ask me a question, and I was just waiting for the question. And also, he wasn't looking at me or paying any attention. He was looking outside at the sales office. And in the end, I thought, well, this is a very peculiar situation. So I said, would you like me to tell you something about myself? So he said, go on then. And so I carried on. I started talking, explaining how creative I was and how hardworking I was and how clever I was and how academic I was and all these sorts of things, going on and on. And he was paying no attention to me whatsoever. In fact, at some point, I do believe he started whistling. And so I realized this was a complete waste of time, And so I decided to stop talking. And with that, he got up and walked out. And as he walked out, he said, "Bored." So I thought, well, I've obviously offended the man, and this is never going to happen. I wasn't too worried, by the way, because I've got this other job that was sort of waiting in the sidelines. So I kind of got up ready to leave, and one of the directors came running in and said, "Alan likes you, you've got the job." And that's exactly how it happened. I didn't know how he could possibly have liked me because he didn't even look at me, and I didn't know what the job was anyway. So strangely enough, I decided to accept the job that he was offering, which was quite an important job, really running Amstrad International, being based in Paris. That was my first experience of Alan Sugar. I'll follow that on with my second experience of him, which probably was about a week or two later, when I went to this company, and it had some problems. And in fact, the previous chairman and chief executive was someone who had a nervous breakdown, and I'm not at all surprised. So I thought professionally what I'd do is I'd look at all the problems in the company, put them on a fax machine. You probably don't know what a fax machine is, but it's something that you can transmit information to a third party. I was faxing through all the information to Alan Sugar of what was wrong with the company, because I thought that was a very professional thing to do. No sooner had the first page gone through that my phone rang, picked up the phone, it was Alan Sugar, and he was, to say the least, very, very annoyed with me. Because essentially, and this is probably not the language that he used, but essentially it was, "Don't tell me what the problems are, fix them. I don't want to hear from you, fix them." And to a certain extent, it was a very upsetting meeting, because that was my second meeting that I'd had with him, which didn't go well. But on the other hand, it meant that actually I had a free hand to get on with the job at hand and try and do the best I could to turn the company around. And so those were my sort of two kind of early, not very promising meetings with Alan Sugar.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emma. And those are two amazingly intense experiences of Lord Sugar. So thank you. And over to our next audience question, to Talia.
Hi.
Hi, Talia.
So when Lord Sugar was the majority owner and chairman of Tottenham Hotspur, you were chief executive. So what was it like to be in charge of one of the most famous football franchises in the world, and especially one so connected to the Jewish community?
Okay, well, I'd always been a Tottenham supporter, so it was a great privilege to be able to be put in the position of chief executive. Having said that, and it's a pattern that's gone throughout my career, I haven't been looking for that job. So I knew that Alan Sugar had bought the company and it was a public company, but I had no thoughts that he was going to ask me to run it, because I was busy doing, in fact, I was running one of the other Amstrad companies. And so it didn't cross my mind that he would have a need for me. But the way things turned out with his problems with Terry Venables and all the other issues that were going on, he turned to me as somebody who he perhaps had some kind of confidence in, and somebody who he thought could turn the company around and operate honestly and faithfully. And so I was quite surprised when he asked me to take over. The thing about Spurs is that I misjudged the situation, because, as you quite rightly say, it is a football company. Even though it's a public company, it's a big franchise. And what I thought was that Spurs was very much like every other company that I'd been involved with, where basically all you need to do is create profit. And if you create profit, then you're a hero because you've saved the company and brought it to some prosperity. Whereas with something like Tottenham Hotspur, it's got much more of a heart and soul, which is completely apart from the business. And I missed that trick completely, in fact. So, for example, there was a very clubby atmosphere at Spurs, so that after work, people would get together in the bar and socialise. And for me, that's something that you just don't do. Essentially, you work. When you finish working, you go home to your family, and then you come back the following day and you work. But that wasn't the way it was at Tottenham. So when I stopped all this socialising, I cut out something that was very, very important to the staff and to the whole structure of the way that the club operated. And I made a lot of mistakes at Spurs. I did some very, very good things in terms of tightening up the business, making sure that that there wasn't any fraud, that all the money that ended up, that people paid to get into the ground ended up in our bank account and not everywhere else. We also enhanced the merchandising and just generally made the company one that one could be proud of in terms of a company operating properly and making a profit. But what I missed was that culture, that heart, which really is something that's very, very important about all football clubs. So whilst I think that I was successful to a certain extent at Tottenham, and I certainly enjoyed my time there, I think if I had my time again, I would actually be more successful and really understand the culture of the place a lot more.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Talia. So this is a slightly tougher question, a more sensitive subject, but you and Lord Sugar had a great working relationship, but in a rare argument with Lord Sugar one afternoon at Spurs, you decided to leave work earlier, and this incident would end up seemingly saving your life. So if you're happy to share, could you tell us more about that?
Well, I've been doing what I consider to be a very important job at Spurs. The thing about Spurs is that, and all football clubs, which is different again from a normal company, is that everything I said and did found its way into the newspaper, and it found its way into the newspaper in a distorted way. So, for example, when I first came to Spurs, there's a famous sort of situation where I saw a whole load of milk bottles outside the front steps of the stadium. And then the following day, in addition to that whole load of crates of milk bottles, there was another crate of milk bottles. So I said to one of the people, I said, what is this with all this milk? What's happening here? And so they said, well, when the team come and play at White Hart Lane with the manager, then they like to have their milk. It all sounds a bit silly now, but when they go to the training ground, then the milk is taken at the training ground. But we never know whether the milk's coming to White Hart Lane or going to the training ground. So I said, right, this is what I want you to do now. Tell the milkman to cancel the milk. Cancel the milk. And what we'll do is when you know that the team are coming in the morning to White Hart Lane, go across to Tesco, buy some milk, and that way we haven't got crates of bottles of milk outside the front door every day. Well, I thought that was a reasonable idea. Anyway, Saturday came along, we lost, unfortunately. And on Sunday, the newspaper said something like, Littner Supremo or something like that, cancel the milk, and the players were too weak, and that's why we lost the game. So there's all kind of this nonsense where whatever I did somehow or other translated into something that was made to be looking as though it was rather silly. And that was a problem about football, is that everyone's talking to the press, everyone's putting their own interpretation on it, and it's like a sieve, and nothing comes out properly anyway. So that was another challenge of being involved in football.
Thank you for providing so much clarity to that story, and it's definitely interesting how the media changes things.
So let me answer the question. The question is, what happened when Alan Sugar walked in? Alan Sugar very rarely came to White Hart Lane other than on a match day, when he was always present. So when he walked into my office, I was quite surprised to see him. And something happened, and I have never got to the bottom of it, but he was obviously had been fed some incorrect information about something or other. And so when he came into my office, he was already completely riled up and decided that the cause of the problem was me. And so he started having a go at me about something that I knew nothing about, and certainly wasn't something that I had created or caused. And so I had a number of options, really. The first option was to start screaming back at him. And I sensed, knowing Alan, that probably wouldn't end well for me, probably. So I thought the best thing would be to let him shout, scream and shout, rant and rave, say what he had to say. And what I did was I just picked up my briefcase and walked out. What Alan doesn't like is when he can't get in touch with you. So what I immediately did was I switched my phone off, because I thought that would really annoy him. So now I had the sort of day off, so to speak, and possibly the end of my career with Tottenham. So I decided to go to the doctor, because I had some spare time, and I had a sort of like I don't know what it was, but something was irritating me. Nothing very serious at all. So I went to the GP, and he felt my groin, and I said, I think you'll find that I've just got a bit of a hernia. I've got no idea what a hernia is, but I know that footballers suffer from hernia. So I suggested to him that it was a hernia, and he said, no, it's not a hernia. I said, no, I think you'll find it is a hernia. He said, look, it's not a hernia, and I want you to go and see a specialist right away. I said, look, there's no point in going to see a specialist for a hernia. Anyway, cut a long story short, I went to see the specialist. The specialist examined me, took an MRI, whatever it was they do. Then they put me in some sort of ultrasound, and they said, oh, you've got fantastic lungs. I said, well, yes, I'm a sportsman at heart. Oh, you've got a wonderful heart. I said, yeah, well, I'm a sportsman at heart. And then he said, oh dear. And he realized that what he'd seen was something rather unpleasant. And that really was my diagnosis of cancer. And had it not been for that argument with Alan Sugar and my decision to therefore have the day off and go to the doctor, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead. Because when I did see the specialist, he was under no illusion that I had 6 months to live without treatment. And even with treatment, my prospect of surviving was somewhat slim. So to a certain extent, it was very fortuitous that Alan Sugar came along and started shouting at me that day.
Wow, thank you. On behalf of everyone, that was, so inspiring. So such a life-changing story. We really appreciate you sharing. So after many years of difficult chemotherapy, it was your sister who would come to the rescue. Can you tell us a bit more about that, if that's okay?
Well, I mean, I won't go into too much detail about the chemotherapy and the horror that is cancer, and it's something that I've become very sensitive to anybody who has that disease, because it is completely debilitating, and I really had not much prospect of surviving, really. And the drama was that I had 2 children, a wife, father and mother, and many family and friends who were feeling the pain more than what I was, really, because I was just a victim and having to sort of endure all this nasty stuff. And more in desperation than anything else, my specialist said, have you got any brothers or sisters? Because we can't find on the World Wide Web anybody who's a match for you, because that's what you absolutely need. And without that, you're going to die. So I said, well, yeah, I have got a sister. As a matter of fact, as I say, I'm very close to my sister. And there's no reason why, just because I've got a sister, she could be a match. She might not have been a match. But essentially, they tested my sister and they found that she was an excellent match. And really, it's a combination of the event with Alan Sugar and my sister coming through with her stem cells, which meant that my diagnosis was done early enough, and I was able to survive. And there were lots of sort of thrills and spills and traumatic experiences along the way, and rejection of various things. So it took quite a long time for my body to really kind of regain anything like normality. And I mean, I went down from let's say 12.5 stone down to below 9 stone. So the weight loss was quite incredible, and I looked sort of very gaunt and weak. But over time, I've recovered, and I'm here to tell the story.
Wow, I can't imagine how difficult that must have been, and it must have been had such a profound impact on you and your family. So again, thank you for sharing. So how would you say this life-changing experience changed you, and did it give you a different perspective of empathy on life?
Well, I don't think it was a situation where I thought that, from the day after my chemotherapy and I was told that I was in remission, I don't think I changed from one day to the next in terms of my attitude. It took quite a while for me to regain my confidence, energy, and all that kind of thing. But I think what I started to do was to recognise my mortality and realise that I had been given a second chance at life, and that probably it was better to do things a little bit differently to how I behaved before. So I talked about sort of being sympathetic to illness. So I've certainly become a lot more careful, a lot more conscious of people and what problems people might have. So when I've gone into businesses, whereas I might have been much tougher or inconsiderate, although I wasn't knowingly doing so, I think that over the last 20 years, I think that my style has changed. You may not think it by viewing The Apprentice, but I'm certainly a much more empathetic person. I'm calmer within myself. I'm not such a brute, although I always think that I dealt with people fairly. And I have had a different take on life and how it impacts people in different ways. Also, I never understood, if you like, mental illness. So I did understand from having gone through a sense of my physical and mental state being so very, very weak. I did understand how that can impact people's mental ability as well. So I used to be very dismissive of those kind of things. And now I have a little bit more understanding that you may not be able to see that someone's not well, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not well. So I think that I've learned a lot from the experience, but it's certainly one that I wouldn't wish on anybody because it's traumatic for yourself, but it's more traumatic for those who love you and have to look at you in a bad state.
That's so inspiring, and I think we can all take a leaf out of your book in being aware of what people are feeling behind the scenes and being considerate. So definitely. So now, if you don't mind, we're going back to some audience questions and now we go over to Gaia.
Hi.
Hi, Gaia.
Mine's kind of a few questions in one. But what does it feel like to be on television on one of the most watched shows in the country? How did you end up on The Apprentice? Were you first a regular at the interview stage and then took over from Nick Ewer? And was it inevitable that you would be involved?
Well, nothing's inevitable. So, I wasn't looking for it particularly, but I think by the time that The Apprentice started, I think Alan Sugar was very keen to do it. And I think he decided that Margaret and Nick would be very good people to be his eyes and ears, so to speak. And then he just approached me and he said, do you want to do the interviews? And I'd been watching the American version with Trump. And in any event, if Alan was going to ask me, I wasn't going to say no. So I didn't know what I was letting myself in for. It wasn't a long conversation. He didn't sit down, draw me pictures, explain how it would be. The production company didn't sit me down and explain what I should do or shouldn't do. I just said yes and went in for it. And in fact, the very first year, compared to the way it's now, I mean, the very first year, it was all very makeshift. When I was interviewing the candidates, for example, there was one camera behind me focusing on the candidate, and all I had to do was kind of nod like that or go like that, and then the camera would whiz round and come to me asking the question. So it was all very, very amateurish, really, compared to the way it is now, where it's a massive, massive show. And everything is so very professional. There's so many crew, so many people who are involved. It's a well-oiled machine. But in those early years, it was all by trial and error, really. Although it's fair to say that even in that first year, that first episode, that first season, you could see the makings of a very successful program, and one that really Alan Sugar, oh, I've got a horrible insect here, and one that Alan Sugar has led, for all these years, and he really is the glue that keeps us all together and keeps us focused. So being on television, I didn't aspire to it, but having done it, it's been an absolutely wonderful experience. It's one that few people get the opportunity of doing, let alone having done it for the last 15 years or so. So from my point of view, I'm honoured to have done it. I'm pleased that people recognise me on the street, even though I've got my persona is not a good one. I'm fascinated by the fact that people are interested in The Apprentice, interested in the interviews, interested in the whole process of business. And I think that The Apprentice and other shows have helped to bring business alive and make people think that perhaps if they've got the right kind of skill set, they too can venture into the world of business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gaia.
Did I answer all your questions, or have I missed some?
She's nodding.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Like, that was really interesting to especially see how even then you could tell there was a potential in The Apprentice and how much it's changed. So now on to Abby.
Hi there.
Hello. I was just wondering if the boardroom is actually as intense as it looks on the TV, or, you know, do the cast and crew kind of bond through all the tasks, and if you're able to share one of your favourite stories with us from The Apprentice.
Okay, well, let me tell you that the boardroom is very tense.
Yeah.
Now, it's not so much tense for Karen, Al and me, but it's very, very tense. Every time the candidates go into the boardroom, something is going to happen. Either they're going to get fired, or they're going to get castigated. Occasionally, they're going to get admired for a piece of work that they've done. But it's a very stressful, uncertain area, and it's all done with no preparation. So it's not like you say this, you say that, I'll say this. It's very much done, and it's difficult for the candidates. It gets progressively more difficult for the candidates because as they get nearer and nearer the finishing line, they get more and more hopeful that they're going to actually make it through, and they get more and more desperate to make sure that they don't get called back into the boardroom and then get fired. So really, the competitive edge is very strong. People want to be on the winning team, because if you're on the winning team, you can never lose until the final stages. And so I think there's a lot of tension, both created within the candidates, and also Alan Sugar is quite an intimidating individual. I don't know that he means to be, but he is. And so you immediately respect him, listen to what he says, and it can be quite a frightening experience. I think the other thing to say about The Apprentice is that what happens is that Karen and we are really following the candidates all the time. At no time do we ever get friendly with them. For example, I never speak to the candidates. If they say good morning to me, I ignore them. Now, I know in the normal way that is rude, but I don't want to show any kind of friendship or favoritism to any of the candidates. So for example, if somebody says hello to me and I say hello back, somebody might think, oh, he said hello to her, but he didn't say hello to me. So the best thing is to completely ignore them. And after a little while, they realize that there's no point in saying how much they like my hair or something like that, because nothing is going to make any difference. I'm there to do a job, and the job is to observe what they do, report back to Alan Sugar, and of course Karen does exactly the same thing. Yeah. So before we go into the boardroom, Karen, Alan and I sit down, we talk about who's done well on the task, who's done badly over the course of a number of weeks, and therefore who we recommend should get fired. Having said that, very often or occasionally what happens is that because somebody gets into the boardroom and they defend themselves particularly well, even though that person may have been the one that Karen and I have said, really, they should go this week, Alan could very well change his mind. So even there's tension in the candidates, but also there's a certain element of surprise for Karen and I when Alan sometimes changes his mind and fires somebody else.
Thank you. I mean, I get nervous when I watch it and I go into the boardroom. You know, I think everyone that watches it can feel the tension too. So thank you.
It's real. It is real. Yeah. Do you have any more questions? Did I answer them all, or was there anything else you wanted?
That was it. Thank you.
Good. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abby. Now over to Simone.
Hi. So my question is, do you think that that people are born natural entrepreneurs, or is it a skill that can be taught?
Look, I think there are some people who are born entrepreneurs, people who are just have got a particular skill And when you see it, you can only but admire it. Having said that, I think it comes in all different sizes and packaging. So that I think that somebody who has got good commercial nous, a good business brain, can migrate into being an entrepreneur. So I think that some people are born entrepreneurs, and I'm fudging the question, but honestly, because there isn't just one size fits all. And some people, by virtue of the fact of their experience, their training, and their general attitude to business, can become entrepreneurs. But I think the true entrepreneurs are people who are always ahead of the curve, always see the future, if you like, know which way the market's going. And those people are very, very rare indeed. And for all the millions or billions that they happen to make, if that's their goal, good luck to them, because they are bringing something unique to the table. And in the same time, obviously, providing employment opportunities to many thousands of people. And you can learn a lot from those kind of people. So from my particular example, really, every single job I've had, every single experience, I've always been through that learning curve. So I think that, people say, oh, who's given you the best bit of advice? I haven't had one piece of advice. I've had thousands of pieces of advice. And these are things just by keeping your eyes and ears open, seeing when somebody does something particularly well or particularly badly, and just trying to make sure you don't make those mistakes, or you try and emulate in your own way the way that you can actually adapt to that particular way of doing something.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Simone. And now again over to Talia.
Hi, Claude. So I actually
Talia.
have a couple of questions, if that's okay. So the first one is, when you're interviewing for a job, what are you looking for in a candidate?
Okay, so we're not talking about The Apprentice, we're talking about kind of real life, are we?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay. So look, I think the first thing is the starter for 10 is the CV. So I think that it is important to make sure that you have a CV that is presentable, factual, well laid out, no typing errors, and pretty well covers the truth about your career. There's no point in pretending that you did a massive turnaround when in fact all you did was carry the bags. So I think you've got to be pretty honest about what you've achieved, and obviously you're going to try and talk yourself up, but I think it starts with a CV. I think the other thing is, if you're lucky enough to be granted an interview, what is important is that you prepare properly. So it's not only a matter of turning up on time, coming appropriately dressed, but I think you need to do research on the company and, if possible, the individual who's interviewing you. Because if in fact you're going to, let's just say you're going for a job at Unilever, and the first question, or one of the questions the interviewer asks is, do you know some of the products that Unilever create, and you haven't got a clue, then really you don't have much of a chance of securing the job, even though you may have other credentials that are okay. But if you haven't taken the time to research the company, to understand what the company's about, and to understand a bit more about the ethos of the company, then I think you're really shooting yourself in the foot. So those are kind of things that you need to be wary of. When you get into the interview, there's no point in being a monosyllabic. So when you're asked a question, there's no point in saying yeah or nah. That doesn't get you anywhere. I think you've got to show off. You've got to answer the question. You've got to be engaging. You've got to show the interviewer that you're somebody who they would want to work with, or the team would welcome. So I think it's important to show off a bit. And I don't mean show off in a sort of silly way, but just try and really explain things properly, answer the question, and be engaging. I think that's very important.
Yeah, thank you. And so, in terms of a CV, I think you've already mentioned a couple of things, but in terms of the CV, what stands out to you, and what are the absolute don'ts that will turn you off a candidate instantly?
Well, look, it's such a competitive market now, so that I know that there are many worthy candidates who I never get to see, because there's only so many people. So if you're interviewing for a job, you might only see the top 3 or 4 people from the list. And there may be the 4th or 5th or 6th person who might be suitable for the job, but maybe there's only one job, and so you interview a few people. So it's more a matter of not making the mistakes that I've identified so far. And if you do get into the interview, really demonstrating that you want that job. So when you're walking out You've got to say thank you for the interview. You've got to say that you really want the job. And it's always worth afterwards following up with a letter, following up with a phone call, and just keeping your hand in. So even if they don't choose you, they choose someone else, you could always say, look, may I keep in touch with you? Or if there's another job, please, would you consider me for that? I think you've got to hustle a bit in the nicest possible way. So I think there are no tricks other than just doing your very best. And I think the other thing that's important is not to be despondent if you don't get the job, because you don't know what they're looking for. You might be an absolutely perfect candidate, a wonderful individual, but not for that job. So I think that there's not a good fit. It may be that for whatever reason your face doesn't fit. And so I think the thing is, you've got to learn from each interview, try and understand what went wrong, what you did right, build on the things that you did right, and then just go on for the next interview. Just keep applying. Sooner or later, you will get the job that you want. And if you don't get the job that you want, you might consider getting a job that you're still interested in, and then trying to work your way up. Because in a competitive market, you can't always get immediately the job that you want. You might have to go through a few rungs before you actually make it through.
Thank you. I'll definitely keep that in mind for my future. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Talia. I think we all will benefit from that advice, especially, how you said it's more of a learning curve than taking all these experiences personally. So now over to Stephen.
Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Claude. Having watched your grillings for many years, it's very funny being on the other side, so I shall ask you my questions. It says here, in 2015, you were asked to be the visiting professor at your alma mater at the University of West London Business School, which is now called the Claude Littner Business School. What's it like having your old university honour you in this way, and what are the key things you teach your students?
Okay, well, I think that again, it's something that I never dreamed would happen. So from my point of view, it wasn't something I'd been angling for, that I wanted, but the Vice-Chancellor approached me, and I had had no contact with the university for a good 20 years. We had lunch together, and he asked me whether I would chair one of the committees, which I did, and I became more involved with the university. And really, as a result of just that interaction, I think he must have seen something in me that he liked. I think he recognised that I'd had a pretty good business career, and also that I'd done my first degree and my master's degree at the university, so I had a good connection with the university. The business school at the time was not doing well. Some of the lecturers were very old-fashioned, some of the students weren't really engaging, some of the classes were not teaching the things which are really to do with business as it is today. So it needed a real shake-up. So I was certain, to a certain extent, I was instrumental in trying to change the way that the business school operated. And then pretty well out of the blue, the Vice-Chancellor said to me, look, we'd very much like to have the business school, with your name on it. And I said, well, no, that makes no sense at all. You want to get someone who's really famous. You want to get a big personality, somebody really important to have their name. I'll still contribute, but you're making a mistake with me. And the guy said, no, we've made our mind. We want you. So I tried to resist it because I thought that really he picked the wrong man. But to that extent, I've been absolutely honoured and delighted to be part of the University of West London. I've played a fairly key role in getting the business school to where it is at the moment. And in fact, we won the best business school of the year last year, which I can't understand. Best university business school. To the extent that I'm involved with the students, in the early years, I was involved with the students in terms of I'd pop in, I'd see them, I'd talk to them, and just the mere fact of being around the university was something that they found very engaging. So they liked me just being there, just being able to sort of talk to me or hear some problems, or me going into just a class and just asking them how they're getting on. So I've not done any formal teaching, which is just as well, given my poor academic record. But the thing is that it's been a very good experience from both points of view, because of my my presence, if you like, on TV, that's given me a platform which has been very helpful to the university. So, for example, if I want to see a large company, because I want them to get involved with the university, they'll see me. Now, they'll see me maybe because I'm Claude Littner and they're kind of interested in seeing whether I'm as awful as I really am in real life as I am on TV. But I can open doors for the university, and I think that's very, very useful to them. And from my point of view, I'm just delighted that I'm having the opportunity of, sort of being an academic, if you like, a professor. What my parents would think of that when I couldn't pass an exam to save my life when I was young. That's how life works out sometimes in the most incredible way.
Thank you so much. And now on to our final audience question for the evening. Adam.
Adam?
Claude, first of all, on behalf of JLGB, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a truly inspirational interview. I think and Guy has done fantastically well. We've enjoyed, hearing everything, and thank you so much, and our appreciation for you sharing so many fantastic stories and giving so many of our members and volunteers so much great advice for the future. Before going back to Guy for the final few questions, I just wanted to share a couple of bit of football banter, a few stories. Obviously, I'm a huge Liverpool supporter and very, very happy. Many family and friends support Spurs, and they've always traditionally played good football. As a budding young Sunday League manager, how do you like to see football played, and what advice would you give for myself and many others in my position? Well,
I think that it's a fantastic game. Football is fantastic. It's competitive. It's a team sport. I think it's a brilliant game. I think that what is important is that it's played in the right spirit. So when I've been on the touchline, I've seen our team play, my children, yours play. I like the fact that they don't play dirty. I think it's important in life and in sport and everything you do not to play dirty. So I think from that point of view, I'm always excited when I was much younger, when I saw my children play football. I myself love playing football. And when I see my grandchildren play football, it gives me a great excitement. And somehow or other, even though I don't play anymore, the thrill of seeing that ball go into the net is absolutely fantastic. Or to see a goalkeeper make a fantastic save, or a defender, go all out to actually deprive the striker of scoring a goal. All those things are wonderful, and I think that they are character building as well. So that I think that you can't win every game. You can't win every tackle. So I think you've got to take the knocks in life as well. And so you've got to enjoy those good times when you win, when you score a goal, when your team plays well, but also realize that you want to win, but sometimes you just can't. No matter how much effort you put into it, you can't. So my final bit of advice is that I think that your co-manager, my son, I think you really need to take over from him. He's not doing a good job. He's on holiday now. I just think that doesn't show commitment at all. So I think when he comes back, I think he needs a P45, and I'm available. What more can I say?
This is a fantastic offer, and I know they're tuning in from their warm weather training, which I believe we sent them all out for some pre-season warm weather training, so that you can give us one more season, one more chance to prove our worth. Otherwise, you're definitely in.
Good.
Claude, it's been an absolute pleasure. We really appreciate it. And I'll hand back to Gaia for the final few questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adam. So I know you said there wasn't a particularly specific piece of advice you'd received, as it's a culmination of all wise words you've heard over the years. But would you say there was a particular thing that stuck with you, or maybe criticism, whatever it may be, that you've maybe lived your life by?
It's a difficult question you're asking me, because I think that one's life is a culmination of many events. And so when I look back, I see that I'm a completely different person now to how I was some years ago. I think that I've learnt a lot along the way. but I continue to make mistakes. And I think that people have got to realize that no matter how old you are, no matter how experienced you are, you're a human being, and we all make mistakes, no matter how hard we try. So I think the key to my life really is that I've always tried as hard as I can. I haven't been academic, but I've sat and taken exams until I've bloody passed them. And if I've gone into a company where there have been problems, I haven't shied away from the problems because I'm determined to overcome them. My health issues, I got very lucky, but I'm determined to overcome them. And I think that that's the kind of key to my life. And I would want other people to take that to heart as well, is that, you know, you're all born with some good things, some bad things. And I think it's just important to try and improve yourself throughout your life as much as you can. Do the right kind of things. Respect your parents, because they're not here for all the time and they've only got your best interests at heart. And just generally try and do good. Be a good person. You can't always succeed. I fall short all the time. But just generally appreciate what's going on. Life is for living. And it's important to just enjoy every moment, because our time here is sadly too short.
Thank you so much. That was incredibly inspiring, and I definitely relate to some of that advice, so I'll be taking that forward. So my next question is, what's next for you, Claude? What does the future hold in store for you?
Give me a break. I'm 71 years old. What's next for me? Am I not allowed a bit of a holiday? What's next?
You're definitely deserving it. So
no, I mean, the thing is that I'm very fortunate in my life, because I've got a wonderful family. I love my children. I love my grandchildren, and I just want to see them do well, prosper, be happy, be healthy. And I feel the same for, you know, our community. And I just hope that that really the world gets back to some kind of normality where people can be gainfully employed, earn their living, have a good standard of life, and just enjoy life as best they can. I know this has been a terrible shock, this COVID-19. We're not out of the woods yet. And I think that we just all need to stay safe, be careful, and see it through. And we will see it through. It will come to an end. And hopefully over time, we'll regain our prosperity, our sense of normality, and then our enjoyment of all the wonderful things in life.
I couldn't agree more. So on with that trend, these are definitely unprecedented times, as everyone keeps saying, and the physical and mental health and economic impacts may affect us all for some time to come. So do you have hope for the future, and are you proud of our communities and our country's resilience? And what would you say the positives are that might come out of this strange time in which we're living in?
Well, I think, you know, through adversity sometimes comes strength. And I think that people have realized that maybe they can work from home quite satisfactorily. Maybe they realize that being held in a confined space for a long time under this lockdown, whatever it was called, is not something pleasant, not something you want to do. So it's important to get out in the world. I think that this violence, all these sort of very upsetting things that are going on, we want to try and make it a bit more of a fairer society. You want to give people who have got, who are deprived, a bit more opportunity to get an education, get a skill, get a trade, and enjoy life. Because once they've got a purpose in life, then hopefully they'll put their knives away, there'll be less anxiety, and there'll be more harmony. And I think that's something we can all do with. We all need to get on. We're all the same, no matter what color, religion, all those sort of things. That shouldn't really impact us at all. We just need to learn to get on and be more friendly towards each other. And I'm just hoping that that's really what the future holds. And what people have gained from this bad experience is that life is very precious. It can be taken away very quickly. And so what we want to do is just get out there, enjoy life, get on with each other, and just try not to be abusive, try and get on, try and be kind and gentle and friendly to the extent that we possibly can.
Definitely. And I hope this evening hasn't been quite as intense as an Apprentice interview, as I hope, you know, I don't think I've quite mastered that skill yet.
You've done very, very well. You've done brilliantly.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you. So finally, every night we ask our guest to nominate and ask another celebrity or community leader to be a future guest on our programme and help entertain all the children and young people stuck at home during this time. If you've enjoyed tonight's experience, which we really, really hope you have, who would you like to nominate tonight?
Well, there are a number of people who I think might qualify, but I think one person who I don't know whether he'd be willing to do it, and I feel a bit embarrassed about putting his name forward without having spoken to him. But when I was at Spurs, the person who was very helpful to me right at the beginning was someone called David Dean, and he was the vice chairman of Arsenal Football Club, and it pains me to actually say that word, but he was a super individual. Obviously, he had Arsenal at heart, but also he was a true mensch. And so from my point of view, if David would be prepared to come along and share his experiences, he's a really nice bloke. I think that you'd all enjoy some time with him. Whether he'd do it or not, I just don't know. But hopefully he might say yes.
Thank you so much. That would be absolutely incredible. So thank you so much, Claude, for joining us this evening and for inspiring us all. We've really loved hearing about your incredible career, the amazing projects you're involved in, and all your thoughts about the future. So we all wish you good luck with all the projects. And on behalf of all of us at JLGB, thank you once again. Stay safe, take care, and we really hope to see you again soon.
I look forward to it. Thanks a lot. Well done. Bye.
And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you to everyone again for tuning in this evening for another night of our summer entertainment extravaganza, being a part of history again. And a massive thank you for all of you for tuning in to our JLGB Virtual Summer Entertainment Extravaganza Social Action Week, supported by the Genesis Philanthropy Group. And we will see you all again tomorrow. Really exciting. So keep following us all on social media at JLGBHQ so you do not miss a thing. Until then, keep well and good night.